Good Sunday morning and welcome to Inside Tennessee. I'm one of your moderators, John Becker. The man with us this morning we're focused on was first elected to office in 1994, represented the state house, then on to the state senate. He was also mayor of Knox County for 2 terms and has represented East Tennessee and some 750,000 people in District 2 as a congressman since 2019. Representative Tim Burchett, we're glad you're with us this morning.
Thanks for having me, brother.
My colleague John North along as well, facing our country right now from your perspective.
I think debt, it's not real sexy, but if we don't get our financial ship in order, we will sink. We rely on the Chinese, and now we're talking about raising the debt limit once again. We've done it about 52 times, 82 times since about 1950, and so it's we've been doing it quite a bit. I don't know why we have a debt limit. I said, if you got a $15 limit on your credit card, you spend $20, it's going to come back. But not with us. We just borrow more money.
You come from a state where we are constitutionally mandated to balance a budget in the state legislature each year. Trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars at the federal level. But to John's point here, what is going to happen? We always see this debt ceiling go up, whether it's Republican or Democrat. Is that going to change with Republicans in control of the House?
I would hope it would, but you get 5 Republicans that side with the Democrats, then it won't. The thing that we do, if you look at any of the major debt reduction policies in the last couple of decades, there's always been, they've raised the debt ceiling. But they've done it because they've said, we've got an agreement. We're going to, if you'll allow us to do this, we'll put these savings in place. And the reality is, we don't put them in place, or we do very limited amounts of them. And again, you're trusting Washington, and you're probably going to lose.
We've seen some members of Congress who feel so strongly about this that they think it's worth a standoff with the White House over something like this. Do you think we're going to face something like that again? We do have some members of Congress with very strong opinions, as you know.
Yeah, well, I'm one of them, actually. I say I'm conservative. I'm just not angry about it. But the truth is, we've got to address this at some point. We just keep kicking this can down the road, and it's just we've seen this runaway inflation in the last couple of years, and we're going to see more of that.
If we have to circle one date, is it out in June when this will really come to a head, or do you think there'll be some negotiation that happens earlier that can solve it?
They'll negotiate going up to it, and then it will be up against the wall, which is what we always do, and they'll threaten to shut the government down, and then if we do or if we don't, that'll be left up to a little bit later. But right now, I suspect I can't imagine there's so much going on in Washington, but it seems to be a lot of the focus is on that.
Would you be in favor of shutting the government down if it meant forcing the issue on the debt ceiling and not raising it?
Yes, I would.
Just to repeat, you'd be okay with shutting the government down just to force the issue?
Absolutely. The debt is that serious, and we always blink, and we always trust the other side, whether it be moderate or well-intentioned Republicans and liberal Democrats, and yet it never seems to matter. We always go around it and say, okay, we're going to raise the debt, and then we go on and spend more money, and the same people get reelected.
Committee assignments came out in recent days. Again, you're back on foreign relations.
Foreign affairs,
excuse me. And one of the subjects that we've talked a lot about is the war in Ukraine. Are you in favor of sending more equipment to Ukraine and more money?
No, I actually voted against. We spent $100 billion with a B. We couldn't find $4 billion to secure our own wall, our own border. Russia's GDP is somewhere between France and Canada. They're not the superpower they once were. I think Putin's he's a loose cannon. But we're fighting a war right now, and now we're bringing Ukrainians over and training them. And this mirrors Vietnam. We sent the money over there first, and then they stole a bunch of it. And then we said, we're going to send armaments. We sent armaments, but they're technologically advanced, so we're going to send advisors. I mean, we're right in that sweet spot, and I'm anxious to get before one of the committees and ask some of the people, if not in a secure setting somewhere else, are there Americans, in fact, in Ukraine right now fighting under guidance of the American government?
Should the United States be acting as it has since the invasion in February as the moral leader opposing and challenging Putin? Should the United States continue that position?
Well, from what I've seen in Washington, it's a stretch for the United States to be the moral leader in just about anything right now. I think we got to look at what's happened to the Uyghurs, a Muslim community in China, where we basically just given the Chinese the green light. We said a few things, but we haven't used any of our economic arsenal, so to speak. We talk a good game, but I think all those people that were cheering for the Ukrainian president on the House floor, I made the statement to somebody, are they going to be doing the same cheering when the Chinese go over in the Straits of Taiwan? And so and right now the Chinese are watching every move we make, every paper clip, every bullet, every dollar, and they're watching how we align with our allies and how it works through our Congress. And I fear that's really what the long play is.
So if you were president, how would your game plan for Ukraine differ than Joe Biden's?
I would have not. I would have brought them to their knees through our production of oil and other things. Because, the first part of the war, what a lot of people didn't realize, excuse me, because of our contracts with Russia, we were funding both sides of that war. And, we were kind of like the proverbial arms dealer. And so I think we should have done that first. It's always good to do the economic stuff first, and then if there's an option to look at war. But I don't think that's ever an option. I think we spent $100 billion, and I don't think we're going to have much to show for it.
We're going to take a quick break on Inside Tennessee with Congressman Tim Burchett. We're back with more of our discussion right after this. Back on Inside Tennessee with Congressman Tim Burchett. Again, he represents the 2nd District in East Tennessee, about 750 or 800,000 constituents. John?
Tim, let's shift to talking about transportation. You're on that committee as well. And I don't know your position. I truly don't. But I can speak as one of many Americans who has endured a really lousy air travel experience just in the last week or two.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that has pretty much inflamed anybody who's had to get on a jet airplane. Now, I don't know what you think, but do you think there is anything that should be done from a legislative perspective to make this experience better or to improve it, or do the airlines need to be held accountable? What do you think?
Yeah, I do believe the airlines need to be held accountable. I tried to pass an amendment in the big the $1.2 trillion transportation bill that specifically said if we're going to give money to the airlines to help bail them out, that none of that money could go to their administrator. It need to go to the baggage handlers, the people taking your tickets, the people sweeping the floors, whatever. And no, it went straight party lines. The Democrats voted that amendment down, and didn't. It went straight Republican Democrats, so of course it lost. But to make matters worse, that entire bill was gutted by the lobbyists and the Speaker of the House. And so it goes back to my original point, is that the lobbyists in the airline industries have way too much control. Yeah, they're going to get spanked on the hand, and they're going to get a little, and then they're going to be up there showering the Capitol with cash legally, and nothing's ever going to get resolved. We've got to start holding their feet to the fire, and in fact start enforcing some of the rules that we have on the books. Because from what I understand, John, that some of the things we have on the books, if we would just enforce them with them, that it would clear up some of these problems. But we don't hold accountability. They come to us on the Zoom meetings, and they're very arrogant, and then they have their folks in Congress that protect them. And that's what happens, and it goes on to another calamity somewhere else.
They've been enjoying some rich times in the last couple of years. It's not been a bad time for the airlines, and it sort of sounds like they don't want to give that up these days.
Heck no, they don't. They're on like I say, the gravy train with biscuit wheels, brother.
One other transportation issue to talk about is something called choice lanes. These are voluntary toll roads, but in this state, we'll hear a lot of conversation over the next legislative session at the state level among the governor and the Speaker of the House about building these choice lanes in the state. Is it a good idea?
I don't think so. I was in the state legislature, and I blocked the actual bill because I put an amendment on it that said that either end of that toll road could not be owned by a foreign entity. Because during the Second World War, radio stations were told they could not be owned by a foreign entity, because if we're in an adversarial situation, they could block shipment of trade or what have you. And I just don't think that's a good idea. I think we've been down that road, no pun intended, but I don't think that's a good idea.
What's your opinion of Pete Buttigieg, the transportation secretary?
Well, I met Pete, or Mayor Pete. I'm not really a big fan, and I'll tell you why. I was the mayor of Knox County, and he's the mayor, but that did not qualify me to be the dadgum Secretary of Transportation. And he's a lot of show and not much go. He, he'll have this security detail. The line of Suburbans go about a block ahead of a block before he pulls into his office, and they'll get out and he'll get his bicycle out and ride his bicycle in. And I saw that more than once, and I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan. I know they're grooming him to be the president or vice president, but I'm not a fan.
You're on a new committee, and John North, I know, has some questions about this oversight committee. Yeah. John, why don't you lead into that?
So it's oversight. It is going to be the most entertaining, the most interesting, the most cinematic committee in the United States Congress. There is no doubt. It's like having 5 people who are in the Baseball Hall of Fame on your team, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, et cetera, et cetera. Oversight, obviously, it's going to be led by the Kentucky Congressman, James Comer. You just announced that you're on it. What do you hope to accomplish from that? And I know what other more extreme Republicans want to accomplish from it. Sure. It's obvious the direction where that's going to go from Comer's perspective. But are you with them, or is there a particular subject you really want to get at?
I'm a caucus of one. I'm not in the Freedom Caucus. I've withdrawn from Republican Study Committee. I'll do my own thing. I'm not going to jump on the first wagon that comes down the road. And I know a lot of it's going to be the sensationalism, a lot of the things, Hunter Biden's laptop and all that.
There should be a Hunter Biden subcommittee for this group.
Yeah. And so I think there's going to be a lot of that, and there's plenty there that we should look at some point. But you always got to remember, this is the committee of jurisdiction that all those things go to. They're not going to be talking about it in transportation. They're not going to be talking about education, health care, any of the other committees. Yeah. And so
So what's your top priority for that committee?
Just the truth, honestly, because I won't be setting the agenda, obviously. The chairman will. And Kevin McCarthy, now Speaker McCarthy, called me, and I looked down and said, oh, it's Kevin McCarthy. And I said, wow, it's Speaker of the House. That's kind of historical. And he said, I'd like to put you on that committee. And I said, that'd be great. And, I didn't seek it out, it's kind of a plum committee. And so I suspect, oddly enough, they might have me there to
mediate.
Maybe. I was told by a national reporter, who I won't say their name, but he said that, what's it feel like being the only adult in the room? And I told him, I said, don't pass that around. I don't need that. But
Speaking of that, we only have about a minute left for this segment, but describe the tumult on the House floor that you were right in the middle of in voting for Speaker McCarthy. You did it 15 times. The people you were sitting next to vowed never to vote.
Well, that's my spot. I always sit there. I call it Sinner's Row. And generally and they were sitting beside me.
Sinner's Row?
That's what I call it, because I'm there. I'm a sinner. I'm forgiven.
So Gates is there, Boebert's there?
Boebert's beside me, Gates is there. And, and I was talking to them about things that are important, that what we've accomplished. And then, and Matt walked, I said to Boebert, I said, where's Matt? And she said, he's doing some media. And he came in. And he said, hey, they were going to let me look at the rules package before we voted on this final time, because it was close to being worked out. And one of the staffers, who I thought was out of place, said, you're not going to get a chance to look at it before we vote on it. And that ticked Matt off. And he said, okay, fine, we'll come back Monday. Mm-hmm. And then McCarthy came over and told us about one of the members. We weren't aware of it at the time, but his wife had a premature pregnancy. He left to go be with her. They had the baby. Is healthy. He hopped on a plane and came back. And there's families there, and Matt wasn't made aware of that. And then the congressman from Alabama, who was heated, came over and said some things that probably shouldn't have, and maybe I said some things to him as well. And so. About that time, it was about to blow up. Mm-hmm. And one of the members of leadership and I'd already agreed that we would call for a recess, maybe 1 hour, maybe till Monday. And then you could see it really getting hot. And I looked at Kevin McCarthy, and I gave that, and I think I was on Fox News, somebody made a meme out of it. And and then I leaned over to Matt, and I said some things to Matt. And then there was a meme on that, and I think they played the theme from The Godfather. And Matt wants to tell you what I said to him. That's fine. But we talked about things that were important. Matt, if you see me, said, okay. And then Matt changed his mind on the recess. And then we all ran down there with the red card because we'd already voted. And when you're within like a 3 or 4 minute time before they call the vote, you can't vote on the machine with your ID card. And so you had to run down there with the red card and change it. And that's how it happened. And that's how Kevin McCarthy's the Speaker of the House.
We got to take another quick break on Inside Tennessee. Back with more with Congressman Burchett right after this.
We'll see that video again.
Back on Inside Tennessee, we're going to do a lightning round with Congressman Burchett. This is his quick first impression with some names or issues that John and I throw at him. Let's start with Speaker McCarthy.
Friend, never lies to me.
Representative Santos.
He's my neighbor. I pray for him. He sits with me on Center's Road sometimes.
Representative Rogers.
He's my friend.
Representative Boebert.
She's my friend. Texted my wife that night and thanked her for me.
Representative Gates.
He's my friend as well.
Nancy Pelosi.
She's actually my friend. She came over and sat with me the other day and asked me about Isabel.
Speaking of friends, Ocasio-Cortez.
She's a friend.
Now, you one time said you were going to bring her here to Knoxville. You all should still do that.
We're working on a piece of legislation, actually, that we're going. I think I'm going up to New York City for the first time ever, and she's going to take me around. So I'm looking forward to that.
Here's another name: Donald Trump.
Friend. I don't know what he's going to do.
How about President Biden?
Not a friend. I know him. He doesn't know me, but I think he's. Honestly, I think he has some real problems.
President Putin.
Thug.
And Zelensky?
Probably one of the more misunderstood people, I think. Former comedian, interesting guy.
You trust him?
No.
Why?
I don't trust too many people in government.
Bill Lee.
Very honorable man. Good friend.
Cameron Sexton.
Another good friend. He worked in one of my Senate campaigns.
Future governor, maybe?
Possibly. There's a bunch of them that could be future governors.
Here's a blast from the past. Randy McNally.
He came when my daddy died. He came to the bedside with me and Mama. So he's at the top of my list.
And then you've talked about, we know you were former Knox County mayor. What do you think about Glenn Jacobs and his future?
I think he's very bright. I think he commands attention, and he follows through. And
we have a city race coming up again this year. I don't know if you've been paying much attention to it. You've got own stuff to worry about. India Kincannon, mayor of Knoxville.
She's a very good friend of mine, actually.
Really?
We don't probably agree on anything, but she's always been a good friend.
How about UT President Randy Boyd?
Randy's been a dear friend for years. His father-in-law was one of my teachers at Bearden High School.
You have been a critic of some of the things that have gone on at UT. Do you think he's done a good job steering the system?
I do. It's probably the best job in the state and the toughest job in the state. And he does it for free.
He does it for free. How about Chancellor Plowman?
She's a friend. I don't think our politics align, but that's fine. She's always kind to my girls.
Let's move to some issues.
So, yeah, this is an issue that I know we wanted to get to with you, Tim, and that is the whole issue of, yes, the Republicans are back in power, but what about the word gridlock? We seem like we're going to maybe hear a lot of that.
Yeah. I had an old lobbyist in Nashville tell me one time that the best thing he had to report to his people was he had nothing to report. So, the American public always figures out a way to handle what's going on eventually. And if we could just stop all the nonsense, all the woke policies, all the out-of-control spending, I think we could. I think the American public could figure it out.
How about term limits? You brought a bill.
Yeah. I support it. Ted Cruz has one of the House sponsors of his bill in the Senate. I don't think it's going to go anywhere. We're going to pass it probably in the House this year or come close to it, and it will die a unseemly death in the Senate. The only way we're ever going to pass term limits is if we grandfather people in. If we'd have done that 30 years ago, we'd have term limits now. And I'll tell you this, these term limits groups, I've never met them. And they're selling people memberships, and people send us $50. We're taking it to the Hill, this bill. And they don't ever do anything. They pay their executive people. They drive around and probably have nice dinners with some Congress people, but they don't do jack. I just don't take that group serious.
Would you self-term limit to set the example, or will you let the people decide?
I'd let the people decide.
Classified documents.
We need a new way of handling that. I've talked about that. It's an interesting subject because being on the Foreign Affairs Committee, I'm privileged to go to meetings that are classified in the SCIF, and it's, James Bond kind of stuff. You can't take your phone in, you can't take your Apple Watch and all that. I've been in there when they said, hey, we're picking up a signal, somebody's still got it, and somebody, oh yeah, I'm sorry. And then they'll go out. Lead line doors, the whole deal down in the basement. I think there's levels of classified documents, and I think some of the top levels of classified documents should have a handler, and they should never leave that person. Whereas if they want to see it, bring it over, and they stay there, and then they take it back with them to the vault or whatever. I think we're going to have to get to that point because this deal, and also, honestly, I think President Biden's being set up. I think the Democrats accomplished a couple of things. It was released, the Justice Department, which I don't trust, had the information prior to the election, and then they waited 40 days afterwards, but then now it's just coming out of every which way. So they've accomplished two things. It didn't affect them in the elections, and it's going to take Joe Biden out, or it will help take him out, because he looks, every time they ask him a question, it's just a blank stare, and that's embarrassing, and they know it. They know they have a problem. I'm in the gym with all those guys, and we talk, and they know they have a problem.
Congressman Burchett, we appreciate the conversation as always, and we'll be checking in as you move forward in 2023.
Look forward to it. Thank you, fellas.
Back on Inside Tennessee with my colleague John North. Let's wrap up our discussion with Congressman Burchett. What stood out, John?
Well, he's a great storyteller, and I was utterly fascinated by what he was talking about, especially with rounds 14 and 15 late at night on the Hill, trying to see if Kevin McCarthy could finally get over the hump, if you will, and him sitting there in the middle of it in Sinner's Corner, as he called it.
Let's talk about the Oversight Committee, because we couldn't spend a lot of time on that, but you said there are a number of people on there who will be pointing out theory after theory and say, we want to learn more about this and that. Yeah,
seriously. I mean, if you want to be entertained or you want to be intrigued and you have C-SPAN, I would watch whenever Oversight's on. Here are 5 people on that committee who alone will make it interesting. Lauren Boebert, Jim Jordan, Paul Gosar, Scott Perry, Marjorie Taylor Greene of our neighboring state in Georgia. That's 5 people. Those 5 people alone will make it interesting. And then the ranking Democrat is Jamie Raskin, and he is no shrinking violet either.
John, you asked about gridlock. It looks like, with the margin that the Speaker has in the majority, we could be facing that. These rules that say one person can object to him as Speaker. How tight a rope is this?
It's extremely tight. I wouldn't want to be trying to walk it across 2 feet. It's just, this is going to be the Congress of investigations, not the Congress of legislation.
John North, we appreciate the conversation. Thank you for joining us on Inside Tennessee. As always, if you missed one of our episodes, they're online at WBIR.com. We'll be back next week with one of our local mayors, her priorities for the coming year.